Let us talk about the difference between the Mandela effect and mental illness. We who know the truth are not fooled by the argument that there is no difference between someone who claims to be affected by the Mandela effect and someone who has a mental illness. But there are some people who are not very kind. So I want to talk about this issue, because it is close to my heart, and for many of you, I am sure it is close to your heart as well. If we talk about mental illness, the core of it is perhaps the definition that a mentally ill person has trouble identifying what is real in the world around him, and what is a product of his imagination. I think we can all agree that this is the textbook definition that sets the border between the sane and the insane. It seems that this may have been set up this way through ignorance, in an age when the discoveries of physics had not even dreamed of anything close to the quantum world we now live in. They saw people claiming that things and people around them were not as others saw them, and there was no explanation. So they labeled them mentally ill. At that time, they had institutions where they would lock people away for a time, or for life in the worst cases. Then they would inject all kinds of poisons in them, and hope they would heal. If they died, society had lost nothing profitable, for the life of the mentally ill was expendable. The person had become a dependent on the system, and was no longer producing any profit for the people. In the most extreme cases, the person would show no positive response to the medicines, yet he had not died. So they kept him locked up permanently, as if he had committed a serious crime, warranting a lifetime sentence. Now, I want you to consider the possibility that some of these, or even many of these most serious cases, that refused to recant, were affected by the Mandela effect. It was not their fault that they were locked up. They had not yet harmed anyone, yet, because they claimed to have seen the world in slightly different ways, and refused to yield to reason, they were incarcerated, and injected with those poisons. How can we as a community of people, affected by the Mandela effect, convince those not affected, that we are not crazy? What can we tell them, to give them the idea that we are sane people, and that there is a possibility, that what we are claiming, is a part of the real world, and not just in our minds? The clearest point that may indicate that we are not among the mentally ill is that we are not the only ones suffering from having seen these changes. It is hard to find two affected people who share the same experiences, but there is a growing pool of experiences from which each affected person is finding matches to their own. While this may work against us in the long run, it is important to start at this point. It shows that it is not an isolated problem in an individual person. However, other mental illnesses are diagnosed by a pool of experiences, from which each affected person shows matches to their own. That is how diagnoses work in mental illness. Another thing we can do is to show them physical evidence that indicates what we remember has at least been part of reality at some time. This is an approach many of us already take with the unaffected. However, that is wrought with its own problems. In the case of the Lone Ranger, There are an equal number of physical evidences that show both hi-ho and hi-yo. So, that does not help. We can try to explain it by claiming that this element is in flux, to change completely over to hi-yo, but that just embeds us deeper in the category of the mentally ill. In the case of the book of Isaiah, chapter 11 verse 6 of the Bible, we can show the video clip of Martin Luther King Jr. referring to the lion and the lamb being together, but he does not quote it exactly as we remember it in the text. Also, any reference to Bible verses, aside from an actual historical Bible containing the change, can easily be explained away. It could be a cultural phenomenon of misquoting the verse. Perhaps they like the picture of the lion and the lamb far better than the wolf and the lamb. After all, is Satan not identified with the wolves, the false teachers? So who would ever quote a verse where the false teachers lie down with the true Christians? You could argue that this is why the verse as it is now is senseless and scary, and that it hints at the devil himself changing it. However, the more rational reason is the cultural phenomenon that others who feel like you do about the verse would unknowingly misquote it by hearing it from others who misquoted it. And after all, it does sound better that way. Another example is Brittany Spears and her missing headset microphone in her music video, where she reaches up to adjust it. There are many who remember seeing her wearing a headset, and her hand movement to the exact position where the microphone would have been is eerie. However, we see this regularly in many people who are used to doing an activity a certain way, and when something changes in that routine, they reach as if something were still there, when it is not. Let us say a man wears a tie to church every week for decades. Then the dress code at the church changes, and he is asked not to wear a tie. He is sitting in the pew, and reaches up to adjust the tie that is not there. So, they have got us on that one too. As eerie as that Brittany video looks, they have a normal explanation for it. Now, I am not saying they are right in every case. However, to not concede on the points that make better sense than us saying, we do not know how it happens, but we are right, and we can see it in our mind's eye, would be foolish. We would lose credibility on all points, and be labeled either crazy, stupid, arrogant, or simply argumentative. This hurts all of us, when any of us act this way. To be unreasonable is proof, after all, that we reject reason. Does that not make us mentally ill? The abandonment of reason? We are not mentally ill, are we?